Thermal detonator should now look something like this. Next, we're going to be marking where the grooves are going to be cut into the outside of your thermal detonator. In order to do this, I recommend using a fine point Sharpie and a wide rubber band. I find that the best way to draw straight, accurate lines is to take your rubber band, place it in a notch closest to a protruding tooth, and trace your line with a fine point Sharpie along the outside ridge of your rubber band. Only trace to approximately the center point. Do this all the way around your thermal detonator for each tooth. Your thermal detonator should now look something like this. Now that you have your lines drawn on your thermal detonator, you can trace out where your light will be going. To do this, place the light so that the edges match up with the lines on your thermal detonator. This is where you're going to want to trace your light. For best results, I recommend using a fine point Sharpie. Your thermal detonator should now look something like this. Next, we're going to cut out the circle in our thermal detonator. For this step, I recommend using several different bits for your Dremel. The first bit you're going to want is a drill. With this, you will drill several pilot holes to assist with the process. This is how your thermal detonator should look with the pilot holes drilled out.
Excuse me, Mr. Binks.
The next bit you're going to want is a small saw blade attachment. With this, we will cut out a rough shape in your thermal detonator. This is how your thermal detonator should look with the rough shape cut out of it. The next bit you're going to want is a barrel sander attachment. With this, we will make the final cut. Now that you have your hole drilled, your light should fit snugly into it. Our next step is to cut the grooves into the shell of our thermal detonator. For this, I use a cut-off wheel attachment. Remember, use your safety glasses as cut-off wheels have a tendency to explode. To cut the grooves, all you need to do is turn down the RPMs on your Dremel and lightly cut into the shell, following the lines you've already established in a previous step. Your thermal detonator should now look something like this. The next step is crafting the switch. I made my own custom template. It's approximately 1/2 inch in width and approximately 2 inches in length. I then traced 2 templates onto a piece of scrap Sintra. Once you have your switch pieces cut out and roughly shaped, they should look something like this. Next is the process of shaping your switch. For me, I find the simplest way is to simply put them into the oven. Set your oven to about 200 degrees, put your pieces on a cookie sheet, and keep an eye on them as they will heat up rapidly. Once your pieces are malleable, simply form them over the dome of your thermal detonator. Once you've shaped your switch, it should look something like this. Next, glue the two halves together. My personal preference is Gorilla Glue, but you can use whatever you have on hand. Remember to allow the glue full cure time before we continue. Once it's cleaned up, your activation switch should look something like this. The next step is to align the switch on the top of the dome so that it's lined up exactly in the middle. For greater accuracy, I recommend popping in your light to give you a better reference. Once you've decided on a location for your switch, trace the area out on top of the dome with a Sharpie. Your thermal detonator should now look something like this. Now turn your sphere over and mark out 3 points. This is where the slide track will be cut. From the inside rim, your first mark should be approximately 1/8 inch in. The second mark should be approximately 5/8 inch, and the third should be approximately 1 2/8 inches in. Next, drill 3 pilot holes in those locations. This will allow us to mark our trigger for the track. Your thermal detonator should now look something like this. Now mark the underside of your switch using the pilot holes as your guide. I recommend using a fat tip Sharpie marker. The underside of your switch should now look something like this. Notice that I have marked where the front will be. Now it's time to cut our track. For this, I recommend using the small blade attachment for your Dremel. If need be, draw a reference line. Once you have your basic track cut, you'll need to widen it. I recommend using a routing bit or something similar. Your trigger track should look something like this. If you are unsure of how wide to make your track, test fit one of your screws that you intend to use on the bottom side of your trigger. It should slide freely, but not be loose. Now we attach our screws. To do this, drill pilot holes in the first and second hole from the front of your switch. Take care not to drill too deeply, or you'll have to start over. For best results, I recommend using a drill bit that is about the size, but just smaller than the screw you intend to use. This will allow for material for the teeth to bite into. Now that you have your pilot holes drilled, you can test fit your screws. Next, attach the slide to the dome from beneath. Your thermal detonator should now look something like this. Now that your slide assembly is complete, you can attach your grip material. For this purpose, I use just a few dabs of super glue to secure it. Once that's done, your thermal detonator should look something like this. Now it's time to prime your thermal detonator. Once your primer has dried, your thermal detonator should look something like this. Now we paint the shell brilliant silver. The core and the slide, however, will remain primer gray. While your silver paint is drying, you can take some time to detail out your switch, like so. You can also use this time to glue your clasp halves into your core. You can also use this time to paint a silver ring around the edge of your main light. Remember to tape off the center of it. Once your paint and your glue has dried, give everything a nice glossy clear coat. Once your clear coat is dry, you can construct your thermal detonator, weather it to your taste, and display with pride. And that's how you make a thermal detonator for under $20. I hope you enjoyed building your thermal detonator as much as I enjoyed building mine. If you have any further questions on this build, you can find me in the Washington State chapter of the Mandalorian Mercs at mandalorianmercs.com.